Hello everyone, today I'm working on this HO scale SD40-2. This one is made by G.S.B model, made in the USA. And there's plenty wrong with this. First of all, the brake wheel is glued there on the side. I don't know if that happened on purpose or somebody had an accident there. I have to reinstall a lot of these handrails. I have a couple that are broken on this side, so I have to glue those back together. And I'm going to do a little bit of touching up. This horn should be blue, would look way better. Now, the guy that sold this on eBay said that it wasn't that much of a good runner, especially on curves. I have found it to be, it's not that dirty. I just put it on my track like that, and I found it to be an excellent runner. But just it needs a lot of help cosmetically. It needs a lot of help. I'm gonna start like I always do by removing the shell. So there's screws at the bottom. So that makes it simple. And then the fuel tank splits out into two. That is not too bad. That's not very intimidating. There's also two screws that hold the body shell. We're gonna have to do a little bit of repair and a little bit of repainting. There's a nice heavy weight in the bottom there, and you can see the motor. These two things that hold my screws together, they cracked, so that can't be good. And then we'll just pull the frame out. I always thought that G.S.B would be a really good quality. I have to say, for the short time I had it on the track there, it ran good for me. I was happy with the way it ran. Maybe you guys have a little bit fancier engines. At my stage that I'm at, I'm really happy to get one of these. And you can see there's more weights on top. The two drive shafts and the two worm gears. It's not too complicated. Now this has absolutely no lights. So I'm going to put LEDs since I'm in here. I still haven't figured out exactly how, but as I'm taking this thing apart, I'm thinking about wondering how I'm going to do it. There's got to be a way. I'm not going to do anything too crazy on the drive system, just clean it. It's got a little bit of hair in there, so I'm going to get in there and clean that. So basically, to get the worm gears off, there's a retainer here. So I'm just going to pop these off, and then I should have the truck right in my hands. So I just pop it off with my screwdriver, and then the worm gear just comes out like this. And then the rest of the truck just pops out, although this is wired in. Like I guess most HO scale engines have wires like that still. Take the U-joint out. So basically get in there and just clean this. There's a cover under here that should give me access to my wheels. These should just pop out. Pretty standard stuff. Some locomotives, they pick up the power from the sides, but these pick up the power from inside. Let's see if these come apart now. Oh yeah. Everything is in there is in really good shape. It was a good runner. There wasn't enough hair in there to keep it from running properly, but I still wanted to take it out. I just feel better. I'm gonna polish up the wheels, I'm gonna wash them, and I'm gonna use steel wool to polish up the surface that touches the rail. With the steel wool makes everything look so good. This particular model, you can see the wheels very well through the side frames. So I am gonna paint these wheels. I'll start with a coating of flat black. And when I do that, I'm very careful not to paint over the area that contacts the rails. This particular engine picks up electricity from inside. So inside I don't put any paint. Some engines pick up electricity from the axle, and in that case I will not put any paint on the axle. This guy I'm gonna paint over. I bought this cheap acrylic paint from the dollar store. That should work just fine. Now I have 6 more to do. Then I'll use some cinnamon brown and a sponge to create some rust spots. The sponge I'm using because it's going to make a random texture pattern. That should look great. So basically I just want to dry brush it on just to create some random spots. And this will help to create movement, to make the locomotive look like it's moving. So you want to go pretty sparingly, but you want some on there. I applied the brown with the sponge, and the intention is to go very random and sparingly. I also put just a little bit of orange, but very little orange. But I don't know, what do you think? How does it look? I think it helps the locomotive look much better. I'm going to put everything back together now. I'm going to re-lubricate the worm gear. It really doesn't need much lubrication. It's actually pretty good the way it is. Once I have everything in my hands, I'm going to give it just a bit of oil, just to say I did something. And that's going to go back in its hole. Just like that. And then the cover. I'm not going to force it too much because I don't think it's going to be easy to find replacement parts for that. And then the wheels just go back in their hole, just like that. And then the little cover plate. And that should be good. Actually, I can test it right here, right on the bench, just to be sure. I don't know if that wire's supposed to go inside there. I think outside would be more proper. So let's test it on the bench. I'm gonna put a drop of oil right on the motor shaft there. Maybe that's gonna help it. So that's running pretty smoothly. So I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other side. Well, I'm pretty happy with the way my drive is coming out together. So now I'm going to work on the shell. I'm going to start by cleaning it with my toothbrush and some dish soap. So as I wash the shell, I noticed it doesn't have inside detail. For example, there's no checker plate here. The only bright side really is the beautiful chassis paint job. So what's your opinion on these? Do you think they are really good, or are they about the same as a Bachmann? I'm gonna work on gluing the handrails back. I've got to redo a couple of these holes. So if you don't have a jeweler's drill like that, get one. They have 100 uses. I've got to reattach these handrails. A lot of them are broken, so it's going to be crazy glue. But some of them still have their pins, so I'm going to put some crazy glue on them and I'm going to shove them right back in there. So that should help the engine to look much better. So I'm going to put just the slightest amount on the pin. And that you have to take your time. So just the slightest little amount on the pin. And then you slide it in and you work all of them that way. A lot of the stanchions, they're just plain broken. So you don't have much of a choice but to put glue, crazy glue on it. 100% I want to install LEDs on this, but I ran into a small problem. There's a nice headlights set up on here, but when I look inside the shell, there's no holes. Everything's capped, front and back. There's headlights set up, but there's no holes in the shell. So I'm gonna have to take my drill and drill some holes. The LEDs that I buy, they also include a resistor from the factory. So now I want to plug them in, but I don't want to mess with these fragile solder points. So I'm going to make my own. I'm going to remove a little bit of insulation somewhere along the wire and I'm going to solder them in. LEDs, they're always directional lighting. So as you come in and do that, make sure you've got one that's going to be the opposite polarity of the other, so you have forward and back. Sometimes I can't do the soldering on camera, but this time I think it's going to be okay. Your wire has to get hot enough to accept the solder, but you don't want to melt it either. Actually, that feels real fine. And then we'll do the other one. test it out. So you'll see I have one going when the locomotive goes forward, and then the other one going when the locomotive goes backward. So that will be my forward and backward lighting. Don't forget to use a little bit of masking tape, electrical tape, to prevent the wires from shorting. If they both touch the little metal counterweight, it will create a short circuit and you're gonna be dead on your tracks. To hold my LEDs in place, I'm gonna use a bit of tubing. This is something I found on the ground. And I'm just gonna cut a piece, glue it in place there, and that will guide my LEDs to where I want to go. And I can still completely remove the drive from the shell at any time. I'm gonna cut it about yo long, and that should be plenty. And I still got lots of tubing for other types of projects. So I'm gonna show you how these things go in. So these will just guide my LEDs in place. And then the same thing for the bottom one. So if I ever need to get in there, I can still separate the top of the shell from the bottom of the shell. And then my piping will hold the LEDs in place. And then I bring everything together. Hopefully they'll stay away from my drive system. Actually is looking pretty good. So let's test it out and see what we got. So let's check it out. So that looks pretty good. And then the back one. Let's see where we're at. So that's kind of cool. At this point, I'm gonna want to be making touch-ups on the shell. You know, the horn should be painted blue. The same with the snowplow here. Although the real 7617 did not have a snowplow, I'm still gonna paint the snowplow blue. It would be a lot of work just to remove it and fill the holes. So I don't want to get into that. So I'm gonna repaint the snowplow and the pilots. The horn's gonna get painted, and also maybe a little bit of touch-ups on the steps like this. This needs a touch-up here, and I'm gonna have to re-glue a couple of the handrails, but it's gonna help the engine quite a bit. So I went shopping and I found some paints that closely match the engine, so I tried them on my paper. So the yellow is just about perfect. So this is from the dollar store. It's just called Bright Yellow. And then Pure Pumpkin for the orange, I picked from the dollar store. And then Walmart the Admiral blue. Really closely matches the chassis blue. So I start by the middle and then I go out to the sides. I'm gonna do the whole cab because it looks pretty bad. But I'm gonna stop, I won't go into the long hood. And then I'll keep going with touch-ups like that. It's not 100% perfect match, but it's actually not bad at all. It's pretty good. And before I come in and paint my pilots, I am going to remove my couplers. Now these coupler pockets, they're very thin, and because I don't want to mill out a section to put my I'm going to put KDs on this, because I don't want to mill a section to put the KDs. I'm going to just going to refocus this for you. I'm going to come in and just put my KDs in this pocket. This will work. There's just no room for that spring. So I can put the KDs directly into here, and that will work. I'm gonna redo these steps here. As I do that, I'm gonna do everything that needs to, everything that's yellow, that needs to be redone. I started to paint the handrails orange, and that really makes a big difference. I'm gonna keep doing that. And I'm gonna finish by painting the pilot blue. While I was waiting for my shell to dry, I put some touch-ups on some freight cars, so that helped me pass the time while it dried. I'm gonna put the couplers back on, and then I'm gonna put the shell back on its drive. Definitely painting the handrails made a big difference. Looks much better now. So it looks really sharp with its new couplers. In the end, I was a little disappointed I had to drill a hole for the headlights. I thought this would be just a little bit higher detail level. That's a good runner though, but I'd have to say it's about the same quality as a Bachmann. And now it's time to run some trains. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I certainly had fun making it for you. Putting on those LEDs was a little bit of extra work, but I'm glad I did it. It really adds to that engine. See you soon.